All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Quarterback Baker Mayfield finally got his wish as the Cleveland Browns are shipping the former Heisman Trophy winner and first overall pick of the 2018 NFL Draft to the Carolina Panthers. In exchange for Mayfield, the Panthers will be sending a conditional fifth round pick to Cleveland. Now, at the end of the day, it was time for both sides to move on from each other in regards to Baker and the Browns. You could see the writing on the wall for the majority of the 2021 season that the Browns were set to go in a different direction at quarterback. Mayfield, to me, I think his legacy though in Cleveland was that he was able to help the Browns in their long playoff drought and win a playoff game. It had been 26 years since the Browns had been in the playoffs and they won a game. Granted, I know that there were some years when they were inactive as a franchise when the original Browns became the Baltimore Ravens, but nonetheless, it was still 26 years since Cleveland had won a game. And in those 2020 playoffs, after defeating the Steelers, the Browns did have the Kansas City Chiefs on the ropes and they couldn't seal the deal. And there were a lot of people that felt that Cleveland was going to be able to build off of that. There were people heading into last season that pegged the Browns to not only get to the Super Bowl, but win their first Super Bowl championship. But it just never came together last year for Cleveland for a variety of reasons. One thing that hurt this offense was the injury to running back Kareem Hunt. I know that Cleveland still had Nick Chubb and they still had a solid ground game. But if you go back to 2020, when the Browns were doing their damage, it was a lot of Chubb and it was a lot of Hunt. And then, of course, Baker was able to feed off of that with play action passing to Odell Beckham Jr., David Njoku, and of course Jarvis Landry. But you think about the Kareem Hunt injury, then the falling out between Baker and OBJ. OBJ ultimately got traded to the Los Angeles Rams, and a lot of us thought that he was done. And he showed in that Rams playoff run that he was far from done. And honestly, if Odell doesn't tear his knee up in the first half of that game in the Super Bowl, there's a good possibility that he would have been the MVP of that contest. So that really didn't help Baker. Baker himself was injured last year. We know about the labrum injury, and that really changed things as well. Got some love here from Cole. Please bear with me. I want to make sure that I'm pronouncing your last name properly. Kelleher. I hope I'm correct. Please, if I'm not, please bear with me and just let me know the proper pronunciation of that. Saying that the Browns did have us on the ropes. You're right. Chiefs fan since 1992 here. Yeah. I go back to that game. Thank you. I tried. Um, I go back to that game, and I think back to first and foremost the fumble by Cleveland. Towards the end of the first half when they had an opportunity to get a touchdown, and they fumbled, and the ball not only did they lose the ball, but the ball went out of the end zone. So of course it was a touchback, and then Kansas City got the ball. And I also think about, Patrick Mahomes being injured late in that contest and Cleveland just being unable to seal the deal. But, I think uh, thank you. I try, trying to make my grandmother proud. She was an early childhood school teacher, and she definitely spent a lot of time and focused on pronunciation. So you would have made her happy there. Appreciate it. Thank you. Um, I think back to last season in that first game that we saw the Browns play the Chiefs, and that again was an opportunity for the Browns to make a statement. They fell apart there, and they just never got it together. It never came together. Baker was dealing with the labrum injury. He went from being a media darling with people in Cleveland to being almost public enemy number one. And then after that, of course, the talks, began to heat up as far as Cleveland looking to go into another direction at quarterback. And then they went out there and they set their sights on Deshaun Watson. And of course, that right there is a very interesting topic for the Browns because you figure they mortgage their future for a quarterback who there's a good possibility he doesn't play for them this season due to suspension. He's going to get suspended. It's just how many games we don't know. But nonetheless, when that courtship began, obviously, Baker then didn't want any parts. Um, with being a backup, obviously. The statement, oh, listen, definitely, I appreciate that. My grandmother, unfortunately, she's no longer with us as well. But trust me, I could definitely empathize with you where you're coming from on that scenario. Grammar was big in our house growing up, so I definitely appreciate that, Cole, and I'm with you 100% on that. Um, but Baker, he saw the writing on the wall, and he didn't, want to be a backup as far as Deshaun Watson. And you can't blame him. I mean, he feels like he can go out there and still be a starter in the National Football League. So of course, that right there, once that courtship began, you knew the Baker's time with Cleveland was going to be coming to an end. And obviously, the Browns gave up multiple first round picks and players to get Deshaun Watson. So that's that. But I think, Baker going to Carolina, in my opinion, he's going to be motivated to prove the naysayers wrong because, there are a lot of people who feel like he can't get it done in the NFL anymore. He was a flash in the pan. First and foremost, you want to see what Baker's going to look like healthy this season. That coming back from the labrum and the knee injury, that's going to be one thing. Obviously, he's going to be motivated as well. But for me, I'm not going to go out there and pencil in Baker Mayfield as being an MVP candidate this season. Obviously, and the reason is it's not like he's going to an ideal situation for a quarterback with the Panthers. Carolina has had their fair share of issues on the offensive line in recent years under head coach Matt Rule. Just last year alone, Panthers quarterbacks were sacked 52 times. So that right there is not good. They have had so many issues running the football as well. And now you take Baker from a situation where he had one of the better running games in the NFL, a solid offensive line, to now he's going to be fending for himself. And I say that because Matt Rule was brought in several years ago as a quote unquote offensive guru that was going to turn things around and turn the fortunes around for this Carolina Panthers franchise. And I said it last season. The only reason that Matt Rule did not get fired is due to the fact that he signed a 7-year deal to be the head coach of the Panthers, as opposed to the customary 5-year deals. So, with that said, you're not going to pay a guy for all of that time to not coach. So they were going to give him at least one more year to try to figure this thing out. But you think about it, last year the Carolina Panthers were in a similar situation. They went out there, they made the move to get Sam Darnold at quarterback from the New York Jets. That didn't work out. So now if you're Carolina, you have a scenario where you have the top two quarterbacks from the 2018 NFL draft. And those top two quarterbacks, they were taken first and third. They sandwiched Saquon Barkley, the running back for the New York Giants. But nonetheless, now you have two of these top three guys. Obviously, it adds to the notion of, some teams reaching for quarterbacks early in the draft. We've seen a lot of that recently where a lot of first round quarterbacks they didn't even make the second contract with a team or they're with somebody else right now. But nonetheless, now if you're Carolina, you got to try to figure out who's going to be your guy. But also, it comes down to the pieces that you put around said quarterback. So for Mayfield, I think he's going to be motivated, but is his motivation, is his ability going to be able to overcome the issues that the Carolina Panthers have? That is going to be the $1 million question. And you think about it, he's probably going to get an opportunity to start. So in Matt Rule's time, and Matt Rule is going into his third year as the Panthers head coach. This is now going to be his fifth different starting quarterback. And when you hear all of that, it's no wonder why the Carolina Panthers have struggled in recent years. So I mean, the Browns are picking up more than 10 million of Baker's contract this year. It was about $18 million. More than four of that's going to be in incentives, and then Carolina's picking up the other $4 million. So let's see what happens there. But nonetheless, Baker needs to use this opportunity to audition. If not for the Panthers, somebody else in the NFL. And I say that because if things don't work out for him with the Panthers, more than likely he's gone because you also have to factor in Carolina drafted Matt Corral, the Ole Miss quarterback. Excuse me, but also if things don't work out for Mayfield with the Carolina Panthers, more than likely Matt Rule is going to be gone. So that means that Carolina is going to be starting over. And if you bring in a new head coach, obviously he's going to want to bring his quarterback in. So I think it's going to be imperative for Baker to go out there and try to audition and show what he can do for the rest of the league and see if somebody's going to give him an opportunity in 2023 as well. Cole, again, I actually predicted when Mayfield was drafted that he'd only last a maximum of 6 years in the league, referencing to his number on his jersey. Cole, to your point, I was very surprised to see Mayfield go first overall. Yeah, and I look at him as a playmaker at quarterback, but I look at him as a playmaker in that Johnny Manziel mode. And some people might agree with me, some people might not. That's fine. But some guys are just made more for the college game. That's number one. Secondly, what we see happen with a lot of these spread offense quarterbacks is that what they do good in college works there. They come into the league their first time around, and nobody knows what they can and cannot do, and they're off to the races. But then once we see teams get a year's worth of game film on said player, things are a lot different. And for Baker, obviously things were a lot different first at Texas Tech and then Oklahoma, where your wide receivers in the Big 12 were faster than most DBs. You're not going to get that separation a lot from wide receiver and defensive back in the NFL. Then on top of that, if your first read is not there, you got to be able to find a way to check it down, second, third, fourth option, maybe even come back to your first option at some point, depending on how much time you have. So a lot of things in that aspect have changed. I just don't believe in Matt Rule being able to get the most out of Baker Mayfield. I think a guy like Baker needs to go with a veteran coach who is known to how to work with quarterbacks. And I'm not just saying this because you're a Chiefs fan, but you think about Andy Reid. And you think about Andy Reid from his time with the Philadelphia Eagles and his time with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's had a long history as far as working with having reclamation projects at the quarterback position, and he knows how to get a lot out of his guys. But I think that, just for the sake of argument, Baker going to work with somebody like that gives him an opportunity to learn the ins and outs from the quarterback position. And you think about just for an example, a guy like Andy Reid. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that Baker's going to end up with the Chiefs at some point, but you just think about Andy Reid between his time with the Eagles and between his time in Kansas City. Just think about all of the different quarterbacks that he's gotten to the playoffs with. It's kind of like the Joe Gibbs effect for Washington. Joe Gibbs did something that we'll probably never see again, where you had one head coach win three Super Bowls with three different starting quarterbacks. But the thing is, it's like, a guy like Andy Reid, Donovan McNabb, Jeff Garcia, Michael Vick, Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes, Kevin Cobb. I could just go right down the list as far as guys that he's been able to have success with. But nonetheless, that's what Baker needs. And, I just simply don't see it happening. The old Seattle under Pete Carroll, when they had talent there, I think would make sense. This time around, I just don't see it happening because due to the fact that the talent level with the Seahawks has really dipped in the last 5 to 6 years. Excuse me. And I think Baker Mayfield is one of those guys that he needs a talent around him. Talent wise, he probably was not going and probably may never get another situation like he had in Cleveland. Because make no mistake about it, 2 years ago, the Browns were loaded. And obviously, things change for a variety of reasons. So, he got his wish to get out of Cleveland, but sometimes the grass is not always greener on the other side. And I think that's what he's going to find out the hard way. Now, he's going to be motivated, but at the end of the day, will Baker be able to ball out? You have the talent at wide receiver. Obviously, Robbie Anderson came out with his tweet today. He's not a fan of Baker coming there, and I think a lot of that, or some of that at least, deals with the fact that Robbie Anderson had a past life with Sam Darnold when both of them were teammates with the Jets. So obviously, he wants to try to get things to work out with his guy. There could be more there. I don't know, but we'll have to wait and see. But nonetheless, I look at it like this: this trade happened. It needed to happen. The Browns and pardon me, the Browns and Baker have gone their separate ways. But with that said, I'm not sure if either team is better off at the quarterback position right now. Again, you think about the Browns, good possibility that Deshaun Watson doesn't play this year. I think he gets at least 8 games. I could be wrong. Who knows? How this situation is going to play out there. So if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, you have to go, you know, into the season possibly thinking it's probably going to be Jacoby Brissett, under center for week number one. And when you think about that, that's really not a lot to get, the fan base hyped up, especially due to the fact that the AFC is so deep this year. You think about the Pats, the Bills, the Steelers, you can never sleep on them. The Baltimore Ravens are looking to get healthy. The Colts, with Matt Ryan. You still got the Titans, and then that AFC West is going to be a gauntlet with the Chiefs, Raiders, Chargers, and Broncos. So, to your point, Cole, the Browns really they didn't do they didn't do themselves any favor in their pursuit of Deshaun Watson as far as not telling Baker. I think there's no nice way to give bad news at the end of the day. But still, if you're Cleveland, you could have went out there and tried to save a little face. And unfortunately, with them, they didn't. And the thing is, you just think about the Browns over the years. Excuse me. This is a franchise. They've been so close, yet so far. And then for so many different reasons, they just cannot get out of their own way. You think back to the 1980s, being stung by John Elway and the Denver Broncos twice. Red Right 88 against the Oakland Raiders in the divisional round in 1980. Then, of course, Marty Schottenheimer leaves, goes on to have success as a head coach with the Chiefs. Obviously, he never got that Super Bowl, but still, you think about the Chiefs under Marty after he left the Browns, and they were a perennial contender every single year in the 1990s. Then the original Cleveland Browns leave and go to Baltimore, and they become two-time Super Bowl champions. And for so many years, Cleveland was down in the luck. 2-win season, 1-win seasons, seasons where they didn't have wins at all. And then finally, Baker Mayfield gave this fan base in that city hope in the NFL. And that was at a point where things were looking good on the Cleveland sports scene at the time. LeBron James helped Cavs win a title. Cleveland's baseball team was in the World Series, and unfortunately, they couldn't seal the deal in 2016. But and it looked like the Browns are finally turning it around, and then just like that, they're right back to square one. So, excuse me. The only thing that I can say to Cleveland fans, Cleveland football fans, is what? I hope that you cheer for Ohio State, because at the end of the day, at least the Buckeyes, they're going to win a lot of games on Saturdays, and they're going to be in contention not only to win the Big Ten but also the national championship. But for the Cleveland Browns' sake, they're still the Cleveland Browns. So let's see what works out, how things work out with Baker in Carolina. He got out, but I'm not optimistic due to the fact that it's Matt Rule and the offensive line situation and their inability to run the ball. Christian McCaffrey can't stay healthy either. So that's a big thing. But nonetheless, this move had to happen. It needed to happen before the start of training camp, which begins in a couple of weeks. So at the end of the day, let's just see how things work out for Mr. Mayfield as he heads to Charlotte. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you like what you saw and heard on this podcast, please feel free to like it as well as subscribing to this channel. Special shout out to Cole Kelleher for his wonderful comments on this podcast. Cole, the NFL season is right around the corner. I have plenty to talk about probably in about 6 to 7 weeks as far as the upcoming season. I got a lot to talk about with the AFC West because I think that is going to be must see TV. I'm not writing off the Chiefs like some people have, just due to the fact that they still have Andy Reid as their head coach. So let's see how that thing works out. But still, the Raiders, Broncos, and Chargers, it's going to be a dandy out there. Excuse me. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.